In this video, we're going to look at the listener for the record toggle button, which is an implementation of the OnCheckedChangedListener interface. This interface consists of the one method, OnCheckedChanged, and the key piece of information passed into this method when it's called is a Boolean indicating the state of the button now that it has been touched. If the state of the button is checked, meaning the isChecked value is true, then we're going to start the recording process. And to do that, we begin by clearing the visualizer view of any previous green lines from a previous recording. We disable three of the buttons, the Save button, the Delete button, and the View Saved Recordings button, because the user can't use those buttons in the middle of a recording. And then we configure our media recorder. If the recorder variable is currently null, that means we don't have a media recorder object at the moment, so we will first create a new one. Then we begin the configuration process at line 117 by setting the audio source. And that's extremely important. You must do that first because the other settings are affected by the audio source in the first place. So the audio source in this case, as you can see, is the microphone for the device, and several different audio sources are supported. You can take a look at the class media recorder .audio source to see what the other supported sources are. Now, once we've specified the audio source, we need to say what the output format for the audio will be. In this case, we're using the so-called 3GP format, and it's represented by the constant 3_GPP. And the 3GP format is designed for better quality audio. It's recommended specifically for compatibility as well with desktop audio players. So if you want to take the recordings from your device and put them onto a regular computer, this will help them be playable with desktop media players. Next, we go ahead and specify the so-called audio encoder, and this is going to be used to compress the audio to save space. The AAC audio encoder is designed for better quality audio, and you should keep in mind that the better the quality, the more space the audio tends to take up in memory. And there are other audio encoders as well. For example, Android also supports the AMR encoder, which is geared more towards data that's going to be, voice data specifically, that's going to be transmitted via a cellular network. So you want such data to be compressed as much as possible so that you don't use up too much of the data plan that the user has subscribed to. Next, we set both the encoding bit rate and the encoding sampling rate as well. And the lower the bit rate, the lower the quality of the audio will be, and the lower the sampling rate, the lower the quality of the audio will be. Now, in this case, we chose 16 for the bit rate and 44,100 for the kilohertz sampling rate, so it's 44.1 kilohertz, and this combination of bit rate and sampling rate leads to a better quality of the sound that we're actually recording. You can also set sampling rates for the AAC encoder up to 96 kilohertz, and again, the higher the kilohertz, the better overall quality of the sound. Next, we enter a try block, and we try to create a temporary file where the actual recording will be stored until the user either saves it or deletes it. And to do that, we take advantage of the createTempFile method from the file class. It's a static method of that class. And as you can see here, we're providing a couple of different arguments. We have a string called prefix. We're going to put at the beginning of every file name the name of our activity, in this case VoiceRecorder. The second parameter, as you can see in the doc that pops up here, is the suffix, the file name suffix, which we're using as .3GP because that's the format we're storing the files in. And then the last argument is where we're going to be placing the file as a file object, which represents that directory. And to get that, we're calling the inherited method getExternalFilesDir with the argument null, and what this does is it gives us back a file object that represents the path to this app's files directory where files associated with the app get stored. You can also supply arguments to this for some standard folders. So for example, if I go into the documentation here and scroll down a little bit, you can see right here that you can also specify, for example, the device's music directory or the device's podcast directory and other directories as well. Now, once we have the temporary file, assuming this works, we won't get an exception, in which case we will take that file object and specify it as the generic tag for both the save button and the delete button. And basically, the event handlers for these two buttons will either take that temporary file in the case of the save button and rename it to whatever name the user supplies, or simply delete the temporary file in the case of the delete button. So when their event handlers get called, we will get the corresponding tag for each of the buttons and use that file object as part of the event handling process. Now, inside the try block as well, we set the output file for the media recorder to the temporary file's absolute path. If you take a look here, you'll see that set output file requires a string argument representing that path. And then we prepare the media recorder. Now, this is a synchronous call that gets the media recorder ready to record the audio. There's also an asynchronous version of this for which you can implement an event handler that will allow you to be notified when the media recorder is ready to go. In this case, because it's the synchronous version of the prepare method, we're going to simply block at this point in the code, and as soon as the media recorder is ready to go, the start method will be called to begin the recording process. We will then indicate that we are in recording mode by setting our Boolean to true, and we will post to the handler the update visualizer runnable, which will start the process of updating the on-screen visualizer view that visualizes the audio recording as it occurs. Now, when the toggle button is unchecked, the else part of our big if-else statement will execute, in which case we will stop recording, we will reset the settings on the media recorder object and indicate that we're no longer recording, and then we will enable the save and delete button as well as disable the record button so that the user can now go through the process of either saving or deleting the recording that they just made.